Namaskar. Namaskar and welcome to the Eikam series on Gita on the Go. We welcome you to chapter 5, Adhyaya 5 of the Bhagwad Gita. And this is the Karma Sanyas Yoga, which literally translated is the ending of karma itself. Now, while that might sound very provocative and very disturbing, but look at how we've moved from chapter 3, which was about karma yoga, which was about the fact that there is action and consequences, that everything is karma, you can't get away from it. From there, we moved on to the Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, which was about how the only thing that we can do. So, while Karma Yoga said, become aware of what you are doing, thinking, aware of every karmic transaction that you initiate. From there, we move to chapter 4, which was about Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga, which actually said elevate your consciousness, elevate your awareness enough to know that what you are doing and the consequences of that will be, and therefore do everything in the spirit of the yajna. Do it completely, dedicate yourself to it. Well, in this chapter, which is chapter 5, which is the Karma Sannyasa Yoga, we move up even one level further and we actually talk about how karma itself is ended. How this whole cycle of action and consequence and that of me owning it or me being the doer is completely submerged. And therefore, the three main aspects with which we will study the Karma Sannyasa Yoga, the first will be, therefore, this aspect of I am not the doer. The deed is being done, and that is really what the yoga is, where the deed and the me and the super consciousness have all merged into one. And therefore, the idea of approaching everything like you were a yogi, not the bhogi. And therefore, how do you do that? That's the first part. The second part linked to the first one is therefore that in this process of the ability to do a karma in the form of a yogi and detach yourself from that space. The second aspect then is also that you detach yourself from the karma phala. You detach yourself from both the pleasure and the pain and the sin and the virtue and the judgment that abounds this karma that you have done. And therefore, logically, the third aspect that we will cover with this is how do you do this? How do you approach this yogi mindset where you're not the owner of that karma, you're not the doer of that karma. There is no judgment that you attach to that karma. And yet you are present here because the first principle is that everything is karma itself. Right? With this, I welcome you back to the Eikam series on Gita on the Go, and I welcome Samir back with us. Samir, tell us about this. This seems to be really contradictory among ourselves. If there is karma everywhere, how do I detach myself from it? I am the doer. I am doing it, right? And if I am going to do it, how do I ensure that I understand the previous aspect of the yajna approach, of the heightened consciousness approach, and looking at everything as a dedication and a submersion. But this is saying I'm not doing it at all. How does that happen, and how do we make it come alive in our lives, Samir?
Wonderful. So basically, I like the way you summarized the aspects of this chapter that we are going to touch upon. And one is, what is this yogi mindset? And I like that term, yogi mindset. Second is, what actually happens with that yogi mindset? What is the consequence of that yogi mindset? And third is, how do I get there? So if I look at the yogi mindset, Sri Krishna very clearly defines that yogi mindset in the opening verses of this chapter. And I don't want to quote it because it's a very long shloka with composite of 2 shlokas. But essentially, you know what he says over there? He says that the yogi, okay, Eika, do you breathe?
Yes, now with pranayama yajna.
Okay, but you're breathing, right? Okay, and do you see?
Yes.
And do you hear?
Yes.
Okay, so now Krishna says that what does the yogi do? Okay, so the yogi says that, yes, the yogi says breathes, swapan, swashan, nimishan, visrijan, etc., etc. right? He eats. So when I am seeing him, I see him breathe, I see him sleep, I see him eat, I see him go to the loo, I see him drink water, I see him blink, and I see myself doing all that. What's different? What's different is inside. You go and ask the yogi, are you breathing? He says, no, the body is breathing. Are you thinking? No, the mind is thinking. What happened? So internally, while externally he's doing exactly the same things that you and I are doing, he's detached himself from the body, mind, intellect construct so much that he now perceives this as happening, not something that he's doing.
From the last time or the level of elevation that we're doing now, Samir, is of saying that it's a yagya and I am doing, but idi namama, right? I'm doing
yes.
From namama. To today, where we are saying that not only do I idam namama, but I also say it is not me. This is just happening through me. I am the nimitta matra, I am the vaya medium of this thought, of this action, of this feeling, of this emotion, but it is not me.
So thank you very much for bringing up this concept of nimitta. Nimitta means that through which things happen, right? Cause. I am just the efficient cause through which things are happening. Actually, for that matter, since we are talking about karma itself also can be broken up into 3 types. One, which is called the nitya karma, which is my daily duty. There is secondly, which is called the naimittika karma, the karma that I'm supposed to do as a part of my niyam, part of my duties, which come periodically. Like, let's say, go to a PTA. That's a duty.
Okay.
Right? Or at in our through our shastras, to do my shraddha every annual, or do my tarpan on every amavasya.
Yes.
So that's a nimittaka karma. My nitya karma is to take care of my parents, to take care of my children, make sure that they have the right tools and equipment to make them study well, try and live a system of values which imparts the same values to them, so on and so forth. Or to do my daily annik, to do my daily sandhya, to sit down and do my daily meditation, so on and so forth. These are my nitya karmas. And then I have kamya karma, actions that I do with my desire, kamya karma. It is kamya karma alone, since I have a desire attached to that I have my sense of I very close to that. And the moment I have that, there is the saying which comes to us, which is said, karta evam bhokta bhavati. If I am the doer, then I am the one who's going to get the fruits.
Correct. So, give me an example of a kamya karma. So, your nitya karma is looking after my parents, of frankly even my daily life, dropping the kids to school, etc., etc. My naimittika karma is that I go and do my PTA, I do the shraddha, I do the rituals periodically that needs to happen. What's a kamya karma? You're eating rasgullas?
Yes. And why do I eat rasgullas? Because I love them. My tongue is drooling. The Nokurer Shandesh, right? And the Pancharamer Rasgulla. That softness, that sponginess, that warmth, that explosion in my mouth. Can you imagine what I'm doing right now to myself? I've transported myself away from this meeting. I'm right now in Kolkata in Pancharamer shop and eating Rasgulla. This transportation that I did, the moment I did that, I have not doing my karma because I'm not here and now. I am no longer doing it with the spirit of yagya because I am not doing this for you or for me or for anybody else, but I'm doing it because I love it. And therefore, I love it. Well, wait for the diabetes.
And so therefore, that's what you mean by the fact that the bhokta and the karta need to be the same.
Correct.
Because you asked for it, you wanted it, you loved it, so you own it, and therefore the consequence. And remember, this was a question I was asking earlier. This sounds very convenient to say ki my body is going to eat the rasgulla, my body is going to have the diabetes, that has nothing to do with me. It was sounding very convenient. Now I understand why it's not the convenient answer, but the honored answer. So therefore, at the root of it all, whether we are talking about nishkam karma, whether we are talking about the surrender of the idam namamam, whether we are talking about breaking through that cycle of karma, it's eventually coming down to kamya, eventually coming down to desire. It's coming down to love and lust and desire.
True. Love has a different...
How is duty or attachment not a part of it, Samir? You could be doing your nitya karma for your parents.
So do you expect
There
that
could be
your
desire
parents...
attached to that.
So you may be attached, you may be 100% involved, but do you expect a result out of it? मैं ना मेरे बूढ़े माँ बाप को अच्छे थिक ब्लैंकेट्स ला के दिया क्योंकि दिल्ली में बहुत ठंड है.
हाँ.
So
no, am I doing it with the sense of I did this for my parents?
Correct. So the moment you bring that in, what happened? It became
kamya. It became kamya. If I'm doing it out of fear, I could also be doing it saying कि यार अगर मैं blanket नहीं दूंगा ना तो मुझे पाप लगेगा.
Correct. So basically, see, and thanks for bringing up this as an example. The moment it's the intention behind the act that is actually determining whether the act is going to tie me down or free me. The same act that can tie me down can also free me depending upon the intention with which I do this. Let me tell you a different story. We all know that Ravan did a lot of tapasya. So Ravan did this huge tapasya where he ultimately cut off one by one his heads and started putting them into the fire, waiting for Shiva to come. Now just imagine when Shiva stands in front of you, what do you ask for? You ask for rulership over the three worlds. Instead of saying, make me yours.
Make me yours. I would have done that. कि भाई अगर तुम इतने भक्त थे और थे, मतलब रावण शिव के भक्त थे उतने. Instead of that surrender of saying भाई Swaha and idam namam.
So what happened? The ego and the desire. The ego and the desire kept together, and Ravan therefore comes back with a lot of power, comes back with a lot of energy, but remain Ravan. Ego and desire. The moment we remove that from the equation of the intention of how we work, you are no longer the karta. And that is what Krishna is talking about.
I want you to talk to me about this concept of ego, its relationship with desire. I understand it's chicken and egg when I say what came first and who came first. But the linkage of that to the whole idea of karma phala, that which I desire, which could be the punya, or that which I'm afraid of, which could be the papa. Because all of that is accruing to me only, na?
So very apt here, this particular question, because you see, तुम ना अभी जाकर चींटियों को चीनी देकर आओ, क्योंकि तुमने छोटे छोटे पाप किए थे, तो छोटे छोटे जीवों को चीनी देकर आओ ताकि वो पाप का फल कैंसल आउट हो जाए.
Correct.
I know that God is an accountant and he's doing all the karmic accounting. I know that he's doing all the karmic accounting, but I think this is carrying it a bit too far.
No, Samir, I have an even deeper response to that. And remember, you and I were having this concept of the apology or the concept of atonement. The one primary principle of karma, as is the principle of energy, is that it cannot be undone.
Correct.
So there is no cancelling out. There is no undoing. In fact, we might go through and we must have a conversation on this at some point of time, that in all of our texts, there is actually no concept of an apology. Right? So if I do something, if a karma has been done, its consequences, the karma phala will follow. Make no mistake. Yes. What that means is that I can't cancel out a karma. I can only carry it forward, and I shed it not by undoing it, but by doing a reverse transaction or a complementary transaction.
You actually shed it by moving away from the fact that you did it at all.
Or that, right? And that process of moving away from the past will actually be, and which is the process we follow, right? Both paschatap, which may be the feeling of regret or guilt, as well as prayashchit, the process of atonement, being at one with yourself, are both processes that are about shedding that karma, not undoing it.
Correct.
or not by cancelling it out, like you rightly said. कि चीनी खिला के चींटियों को I can't, cancel out my micro karmic transactions.
So you see, we have this because of, I think years of tradition and how we've been all brought up. ये झूठ बोलना पाप है, सच बोलना पुण्य है, etc., etc. So this concept of papa punya apparently is something beyond us, and it is something that has been layered onto us by some being or some set of superior things that are telling us कि therefore that what is going to happen is right or wrong. It is papa or punya. Now, right and wrong is a temporal judgment. Draupadi married 5 people.
उसमें कोई judgment कैसे हो सकता है? Correct, I agree with you.
तो was it right or wrong? Was it right or wrong?
Judgment किसने attach किया? When did it become? When did the concept of action and consequence, which is honestly a very linear scientific concept, become the concept of judgment and right and wrong and sin and virtue and sahi and galat and pap and punya? And how? And what does the Bhagwad Gita say?
So here, you see, Swami Chinmayananda puts it very beautifully. Anything that is taking you towards union with what you are really is punya. Anything that takes you away from that union is pap. By definition, therefore, what will happen is, if I'm not a psychopath and I've gone and murdered somebody, or I've gone and told a lie, within that entire range, I am driven by guilt. And because I am driven by guilt, I have the guilt inside me. I am no longer thinking of the divine. I am no longer one in my thinking, in my concentration, in my intentions. What am I doing? So I build up, right? One lie leads to another lie, leads to another lie, and I have this whole life of lies that I am leading. Hence it is pap. Pap is not because socially this was wrong. It was wrong because it took you away from your real journey.
Which is where awareness of emotion and flipping of that emotion into a yajna becomes important before you detach yourself from them. And by the way, it doesn't matter whether I'm just stretching to prove a point, but it doesn't matter whether it is about a murder that you've committed or it is a rasgulla that you've eaten.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
So how do you eat a rasgulla, Samir, without desire? How do you eat a rasgulla? So let's say there is a rasgulla to be eaten.
Okay, so the hankering for the rasgulla is gone.
Yes.
You sat there, and the person to whose house you've gone. So since the hankering has gone, there is no expectation. You've gone there, you sat there, and the person gave you a boiled karela.
Yes.
And you eat it with the same pleasure or same intensity that you would have eaten the rasgulla. Is that too heavy?
I'm just thinking rasgulla is lighter than having this conversation in the context of killing someone, for instance. And
No,
really,
but-
right, when Bhagwan Sri Krishna is talking to Arjun, this conversation is not about having a rasgulla. This conversation is actually about
Killing people.
killing people.
Correct. And now when you're going to say, fine, now I have this duty that says that I need to get rid of these people because there is a need for social order driven by the particular framework of time, sthan, kal, patra, vishaya ke basis pe, this particular social order that needs to be re-established. It is important for me as a Kshatriya, Arjuna being a Kshatriya, it is part of my duty to make sure that this order is restored.
So this act needs to be done by me. It's happening. I have no attachment to it. I have no desire to do this. I don't even have, in Arjun's case, he has aversion to it, but aversion is also the same continuum.
Correct.
So not only do I not have any desire, I'm not attached. This killing needs to happen or is happening because it must happen now. Correct. And it must happen through me.
Correct.
But there is none of me in this. My intention is actually to kill. So how do I detach myself from that intention?
So the intention to kill is, what am I killing? I am not killing that person. I am killing the fact that there is unrighteousness.
कौन जज बनेगा समीर इसका? ये तो मतलब frankly in today's context of the geopolitical context, these are the biggest questions, no? So, when America invades Afghanistan or invades Kuwait.
So very rightly put. Very rightly put. So when we go ahead with this Bhagwad Gita and as we explore it further, we will see a clear hierarchy of these interactions. Me, bigger than me, my family, bigger than my family, my society, bigger than my society, my community, bigger than my community, my state, bigger than my state, my region, bigger than my region, my country, bigger than my country, humanity or Asia, bigger than Asia, the world, bigger than the world, this entire universe. There is this entire hierarchy that we need to go through. You can't jump into the saying that, oh, I love the universe.
And this can't start with me, but it needs to end with me.
Correct. Me being the big self.
Yeah, the big self. Yes.
Not the small ego wala me.
And therefore the intention comes into play.
And therefore getting rid of this fear or
desire, either fear or desire.
Fear, desire, pain, pleasure, wala. He very clearly says that, look, it's not coming to you from some divinity. Let me quote. Nadatte kaschit papam na chaiva sukritam vibhuhu ajnanena vritam jnanam tena muhyanti jantavaha. So basically, what does he say here? He says vibhuhu, the divine, does not sit down and allocate pap and punya. You, with your ajnana, you have covered the knowledge, avrita. You have covered the knowledge. The reality of you have covered with your ignorance, and therefore you are deluded about this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. And that's why you are all the time judging, making these judgmental moves in your life. Get away from that. Look at everything that's happening and say that these are things that need to happen and this is the right time and the place for them to happen. Let me get into them fully involved with one step away. Mentally.
So how does one do this?
Well, Krishna has always given us answers on how to do it. He doesn't let it go at theory. So again, I will have to quote, and let me give you a quote here. Yonta sukhontar ramas tathantar jyotirevayah sa yogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhutodhi gacchati. What he is saying here is that you need to be happy in yourself. Why does he say that? He says that because, let me quote something else now. He says in verse 22, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyavanta kaunteya nateshu ramate buddha. Eika, what he says here is so very nice. He says that, the first shloka that I chanted or recited, he said, be happy in yourself. But how do I be happy in myself? I be happy in myself because I realize that these pleasures and these pains that encompass me in my life, I run after pleasure, right? I run after pleasure all the time. And I run away from pain all the time. In technical language, we call it raga dvesha, and therefore we run towards what we are desiring or what we feel will give us pleasure, and we run away from what we feel will give us pain. Now what happens? That which is going to give you pleasure becomes a source of, I bought a Mercedes. I've always been wanting to buy a Mercedes. And I bought a Mercedes. And for a few days, for a few months, possibly for a few minutes, depending on the situation, you are so happy, right? You're full of pleasure. And your neighbor drives past with the Lamborghini. How long is your Mercedes going to give you pleasure? Now you're thinking, this is a stupid car. I should have bought a Lamborghini. Let me take it to a living being. We've talked about Marley. And Marley really is a big source of pleasure to everybody in the house. He cuddles, he gives you head pats. He acknowledges the fact that we've gone out, we've come back. He comes and gives us affection. So he gives us a lot of pleasure. But he's going to live for another 10 years. And when Marley gives up the body, he's going to cause pain. Source of pleasure, which is Marley, is also the source of pain. Now, if I realize that, if I understand that every pleasure that I am getting, all the rasgullas that I ate are the source of the diabetes. So every time, if I have this clear vision in my mind that every pleasure that I get is going to become a source of pain, every pain that I get is going to become a source of pleasure, then I realize that this entire thing that we are working with is so transient, is so continuously ever changing, which is where Bhagavan Shankaracharya says, Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. Mithya doesn't mean false. Mithya means ever changing, transient, a projection of what is not actually illusory. I mean, that's a better word to use.
Samir, ये तो works both ways, na? So the fact that my rasgullas today, which give me pleasure, will give me the pain of diabetes later, or the workout that I do or the run that I go for today, the pain it gives me today will give me the pleasure of good health later. So
And that's the cycle.
That's the cycle. So does it require simply my awareness of this cycle? Because the awareness will not help me detach.
Correct.
I want the pleasure of the rasgulla today, and I want to avoid the pain of diabetes later, and I will reluctantly and very painfully go through the pain of a run today because of the good health it will give me later. In my mind, I have classified that pain, anything that gives me pain today, has been classified as a virtue. I may not call it pap and punya, but I am calling it as something good, because no pain, no gain, because this pain will give me pleasure later, etc., etc. And everything that gives me pleasure today, lying down, sacking down the whole day and watching TV or eating rasgullas, will give me pain later. Right? So, in my mind, one level is awareness. And with awareness, I might, by the way, also be willing to live with those consequences. ठीक है यार, आज मुझे रसगुल्ला चाहिए, कल डायबिटीज होगी, देखी जाएगी, और आज मैं एक्सरसाइज करूंगा क्योंकि बाद में मुझे अच्छी बॉडी मिलेगी.
Fine. Which is, if you're only stuck there, then you're right, still in the beginning, right? We are talking of the Charvaki. But right now, you're at the end of possibly chapter 5. You've already gone through chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've understood that there is this gradation of karma to jnana karma sannyasa to karma sannyasa, and you've realized that you are the karta. You have been thinking of yourself as the karta, and hence you do not want to become the bhokta. Then you need to go a little deeper and say, what is the source of this pleasure? What is the source of this pain? What is that witness who's constantly in pleasure?
Seeking either this pleasure or avoiding this pain.
Correct. And that has been classified as, you see, Sanskrit is an interesting language. There is no opposite to ananda.
No.
Right? Sukha ka opposite hai, dukha. But there is no opposite to ananda. Ananda is bliss. I mean, it's a very, very
translation, but yeah,
very, very sketchy translation. Doesn't really capture what ananda is. But then ananda has no translation. Ananda is a state which is non-dual. Ananda is that, and therefore, in the earlier shloka that I was chanting, Sri Krishna says that the yogi has found that source of pleasure in himself. He's become Atma Rama. He's playing with himself. That self, which is the source of all happiness. And which is why that self, since we have no names for it, we have some descriptors for it. And we call it Sat, it exists. Chit, it is conscious. And it is Ananda. It is bliss. Hence the name Sachidananda. So the Atma Rama is that Sachidananda. So now you see the gradation that Krishna has taken us through. He gave us the summary. I mean, Arjuna had a nervous breakdown. Then he gave us the summary. Then he told us about karma, getting involved with the karma, and being here and now, and so on and so forth. Then he moved into saying, okay, get rid of the effect of the consequences. And then he said, get rid of the karma itself, because you are only the observer. Things will happen.
And the way you get rid of the karma itself, which is what we are dealing with in the karma Sanyas Yoga, is the three phases that we're talking about. The first one is about removing yourself from doership. And by removing yourself from doership, also removing yourself from the consequences or the karma of that doership. So the relationship between the karta and the bhukta, first distance yourself from that. In order to distance yourself from that, and as a consequence of that, understand and distance yourself from the good and the bad and the sin and the virtue and the papa and the punya and the sahi and the galat and all the judgments that come with it. And in order to be able to do that, is the heightened awareness that puts you in the center of that cause of pain and pleasure, the realization that pleasure will eventually be pain and pain will eventually be pleasure. So detach yourself from that source itself, and that then allows you to sort of work backwards, detaching yourself from the judgment of the consequences, and therefore detaching yourself from being the doer in this whole space of karma and the karma phala, and therefore discovering the nature of the Atman, the engagement with your own self, and therefore realizing the whole idea of the Satta, Chitta, and the Anand, that which exists, which is, that which is consciousness, and that which provides bliss. And that's what we'll step into as we close chapter 5 on the Karma Sannyasa Yoga and step further and move on in this journey together in the Eikam series on Gita on the Go.
Iti Srimad-Bhagavad-Gitasu Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishna Samvade Karma Sannyasa Yogo Nama Panchamodhyayah. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Na 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 na.